The galaxy had grown quiet, but the silence was not peaceful. In the cold, endless darkness above Vurex 7, a star that had burned for millions of years, a fleet hung like a black cloud. Thousands of sharp, needle-like ships glinted under the pale light of the dying sun, each designed for one purpose: to dominate, to destroy, and to break the will of any who resisted. These ships belonged to the Threx Dominion, an ancient and ruthless alien empire. They had conquered countless planets, not always through battle, but often through fear. They had learned that fear could shatter hope faster than any weapon. For centuries, the Threx had expanded, crushing entire civilizations with terrifying efficiency, leaving nothing behind but smoke and silence. Their enemies rarely had a chance to fight back, and most species they conquered bowed without a fight. But now their attention had turned to humans, a young species from a small blue planet called Earth. The Threx considered humans insignificant, inexperienced, and fragile. They thought these creatures would be easy to break. However, humans had already shown signs of defiance. They had built ships, fought in space battles, and survived in conditions no other species could endure. They adapted quickly, thinking creatively, and most importantly, they refused to surrender. The Threx observed humans with growing irritation. Their usual methods, intimidation, terror, and demonstration of power, had not worked. The Dominion's leaders became impatient. They needed a new plan, a tool that could strike at the very core of human instinct: fear. They decided to use a creature, one bred over generations on death worlds where only the strongest survived. It was designed to be terrifying, a predator whose sight alone could make prey freeze in place. Its eyes glowed like molten gold, its claws could tear through armor, and its roar carried the force of a falling mountain. The Threx believed that even the bravest human soldiers would crumble when faced with this beast. They called it the Varric, and they did not plan to send a full-grown Varric. They wanted something small, something that could be unleashed suddenly, anywhere humans might feel safe. The plan was to release a young Varric, a cub, onto human colonies. The Dominion expected the humans to panic at the sight of it, to see a killing machine so perfect, so terrifying, that they would flee, surrender, or break apart from fear. The thought pleased the Threx generals. They imagined human leaders trembling, civilians screaming, and the colonies falling without a fight. The Varric cub was placed in a drop pod, sealed and equipped with survival enhancements to ensure it reached the target alive. It was meant to be the perfect psychological weapon, a symbol of the Dominion's dominance. The drop pod would land quietly, the cub would awaken, and fear would spread like wildfire. The Threx were confident. Their scouts reported that human defenses were minimal on the outer colonies. Their calculations showed that even the smallest Varric would trigger chaos. But the humans had one thing the Dominion had underestimated: unpredictability. They had courage, a stubbornness that could not be measured in statistics or algorithms. And in the quiet hours before dawn on New Kyoto, a human city on Mars, the drop pod fell through the thin atmosphere, a silver shadow against the red sky. The Varric cub inside stirred, unaware of the plans that had been made for it. It had never known fear or cruelty. It only knew hunger, warmth, and the strange curiosity of life. When the pod hit the surface, dust and metal screamed against each other, and the city awoke to an event that would change everything. The Threx expected screams, panic, and terror. But in the dusty crater where the pod landed, the cub blinked, stumbled forward, and did something no one predicted. Instead of attacking, it hesitated. Its golden eyes looked around, not with malice, but with confusion. The first humans to approach it froze, unsure whether to fight or flee. They had been trained for the worst, but the cub gave them none of it. And then, as if sensing something inside them, the tiny predator did the impossible. It curled up and went to sleep. The humans who discovered the drop pod were part of a Mars rescue team, trained to respond to accidents, not to alien weapons of war. Commander Alara Voss led the team. She was a woman in her early 30s, with short dark hair and a scar running down her left cheek, a mark from a past battle that reminded her daily of the cost of survival. She had faced danger before, but nothing like what lay in the crater before her. The pod had split open in a cloud of red dust, metal shards scattered like teeth across the Martian soil. Inside lay the Varric cub, trembling but alive. It was small, no larger than a human child, with black fur glistening under the weak Martian sunlight. Its four eyes blinked in confusion, glowing faintly golden. Its claws scratched at the metal floor of the pod, and it let out a soft, pitiful whimper. The rescue team froze. They had expected to find debris, perhaps a malfunctioning probe. Instead, they found a living creature that seemed impossible, a predator from nightmares meant to inspire terror. The first reaction was fear. They raised weapons automatically, hands shaking. Every instinct screamed to prepare for attack. The cub looked at them, tilting its head, as though studying these strange, upright creatures in uniform. Then it stumbled forward, slow and unsteady, and pressed its small head against Commander Alara's boot. The soldiers held their breath. Nothing happened. The cub made no threatening sounds. It did not lunge or swipe. Instead, it curled up in a ball and began to breathe softly, the warmth of its tiny body radiating against the cold Martian dust. Alara lowered her weapon carefully. She knelt, keeping her hands visible, and reached toward the cub. Its golden eyes met hers, wide and unafraid, full of innocence rather than malice. She felt a strange connection, a silent understanding passing between them. The soldiers whispered among themselves, confused and unsure. They had been trained to kill such creatures, but their training could not explain what they were seeing. The cub, meant to terrify, had chosen calm. It had chosen trust. Over the next few hours, the team observed the cub closely. They tried to feed it synthetic protein bars and small amounts of water, but it refused. It did not run or attack. It simply stayed near Alara, curling around her boots, nuzzling her lightly when she knelt. It had no interest in the soldiers' weapons, no reaction to the alerts on their helmets, no sign that it recognized danger. Commander Alara realized that the cub was rejecting the Threx programming. It had been engineered for fear, yet it showed none. It was as if the tiny predator understood that the humans before it were not enemies. She decided to name it Nox, after the shadows of Mars nights, where the cub's fur seemed to blend perfectly. The name suited it, mysterious yet gentle. Word of the discovery spread quickly through the colony. Images captured by drones of the small four-eyed creature sleeping in the arms of a human commander circulated on news channels across the solar system. The Threx Dominion had intended horror, but instead humanity saw hope. The images were shared widely, and people laughed at how tiny and adorable the creature appeared. Soldiers who had fought through brutal space battles smiled at the sight, feeling a warmth they had not felt in years. Civilians cheered at the gentle trust between human and predator. Nox became a symbol almost immediately, proof that humans could face the unknown and survive, not with fear, but with courage and compassion. Meanwhile, the Threx watched the transmissions with disbelief. Their weapon, carefully engineered to break spirits, had failed in the most unexpected way. Instead of paralyzing the humans with terror, the Varrock cub had become a friend, a companion, and an emblem of resilience. It had given humanity a gift they did not even understand yet, a reason to fight back not with fear, but with strength and determination. Commander Alara knew that the real test was coming. The Threx would not let their plan fail forever. Their fleets were already in motion, moving to crush Mars. But as she looked down at Nox, asleep against her arm, she felt a rare certainty. Whatever the Dominion sent, whatever horrors awaited them, humans would face it. They would survive. They would adapt. And this tiny, unassuming predator had just reminded them that courage often comes in the most unexpected forms. In that quiet moment, under the orange-red sky of Mars, with dust drifting lazily around them, humanity found a spark that would grow into a fire strong enough to challenge even the most powerful empire in the galaxy. The calm on Mars did not last long. The Threx Dominion was furious. Their carefully planned weapon, designed to crush humans with fear, had failed spectacularly. The Varrock cub, instead of terrorizing the colony, had curled up in Commander Alara Voss's arms, asleep and gentle, giving humanity hope. The Dominion could not allow such defiance to go unpunished. Orders were sent through the vast expanse of space, and the Obsidian Armada, the Threx's most feared fleet, began moving toward the Sol system. Thousands of ships, each bristling with weapons capable of obliterating entire cities, left a trail of glowing exhaust as they crossed the void. On Mars, alarms echoed through New Kyoto. The colony, still marveling at the cub, suddenly faced the stark reality of war. The rescue teams were no longer just explorers or medics. They were the first line of defense. Commander Alara stood on the command deck of the HMS Resolute, the largest human warship in orbit. a vessel barely a match for the incoming fleet but fast, agile and manned by crews who refused to surrender. She studied the readouts, her hands gripping the console, eyes sharp and unwavering. Every sensor screamed the same message, overwhelming odds. The Threx ships were vast, elegant, and deadly, moving in perfect formations that spoke of centuries of discipline. Human ships were small, fast, and outnumbered, but they had something the Threx did not: ingenuity, courage, and determination. As the first of the Threx cruisers entered Martian orbit, the battle began. Plasma beams tore through the thin atmosphere, lighting the red sky with deadly streaks of blue and green. Explosions shook the colony below, sending dust and debris flying across the Martian plains. The human fleet darted through space like a swarm of hornets, weaving between enemy fire, dodging with uncanny precision, and retaliating with missiles, laser cannons, and improvised weapons. Every hit counted, every maneuver mattered. Ilara's voice rang through the comms, steady and commanding. "Hold formation! Focus fire on their front lines. Protect the civilians below." Her orders were precise, her determination unwavering, even as smaller human ships were torn apart. The Varric cub, Nox, now larger than before, had moved to the bridge, its glowing eyes scanning the battle through the viewport. The crew could feel its presence, a quiet strength that seemed to calm them in the chaos. Nox did not attack, did not roar, yet everyone aboard the Resolute felt the power it radiated. It was as if the creature knew that fear would not win this battle, that survival required trust and courage. As the Threx advanced, their communications jammed human systems, trying to cut them off from coordination. But humans adapted. Mining lasers were repurposed as beam cannons, freighters became missile platforms, and even maintenance drones were fitted with improvised weapons. Civilians helped from the ground, controlling orbital drones that harassed the Threx ships, creating openings for human fighters to strike. Every sacrifice, every bold move turned the tide slightly, keeping hope alive. The battle raged for hours. Mars's sky burned with explosions, the vacuum of space filled with shattered metal and fire trails. The humans were fighting against impossible odds, but their resilience shone brighter than any Threx weapon. Ilara knew that Mars alone could not hold the fleet forever, that they needed reinforcements, but every second they survived weakened the Dominion's confidence. The Threx had expected fear to do the work for them. They had underestimated humanity's willingness to fight when hope was alive, and they had underestimated the bond between humans and the creature that had been sent to terrify them. Nox, curled quietly near Ilara's chair, seemed to sense the strategy unfolding, its presence a silent encouragement, reminding every human aboard the Resolute that bravery was not measured by size or power, but by will. In the midst of chaos, humanity held firm, proving that even the smallest species, against the largest empire, could rise with cunning, courage, and the unexpected strength of unity. The first clash had been survived, but the battle was far from over, and Ilara knew that the Threx would return, stronger and more determined, to crush the human spirit once and for all. Yet in her heart she carried one certainty: humans did not bend. They did not break. And with Nox by her side, even the mightiest empire in the galaxy would learn that courage was contagious, and fear had no power over those who refused to surrender. The battle for Mars raged on, the sky above the planet streaked with fire, metal, and smoke. The Threx armada advanced relentlessly, their massive ships cutting through space like black predators, firing with deadly precision. Human defenses were stretched to their limits. Every small ship, every freighter, every converted mining drone had become a weapon. The humans moved as one, coordinated, inventive, and fearless, but the sheer numbers of the Threx threatened to overwhelm them. Commander Ilara Voss stood on the bridge of the HMS Resolute, watching the enemy approach, calculating odds that seemed impossible. Her crew worked tirelessly, firing missiles, directing fighter squadrons, and coordinating with orbital defense stations. The humans were holding their ground, but every moment brought the threat of annihilation closer. In the midst of this chaos, Nox, the Varric cub that had once been meant to terrify them, had grown noticeably larger. Its black fur now glimmered with faint streaks of bioluminescent energy, and its golden eyes glowed brighter, almost as if it were feeding off the tension around it. The crew noticed it first when the ship's systems, weakened by Threx jamming and interference, suddenly surged with extra energy. Lights brightened, shields strengthened, and weapons recharged faster than anyone could explain. Nox had stepped closer to the ship's main reactor, pressing its claws against the energy conduit. There was a hum in the air, low and deep, that seemed to vibrate through the hull. The humans watched, awed and unafraid, as the creature's body glowed softly, its energy merging with the ship's systems. With this sudden boost, the Resolute became a beacon of hope and power. "All batteries, fire everything," Alara shouted, and her command rang through the fleet. Lasers, missiles, and plasma cannons from every ship erupted in a synchronized attack. The Threx vanguard was caught off guard. Their formations, so precise and disciplined, faltered under the unexpected force. Smaller human fighters darted through gaps in the enemy's lines, striking cruisers that had seemed untouchable moments before. Mars itself became a battleground, the ground shaking as explosions ripped through orbit and down to the cities below. Civilians, watching from shelters and remote stations, cheered and sent messages of encouragement to the fleet. Every human contribution counted, every action making a difference. Yet the battle was not without cost. Ships were destroyed, fighters lost, and human lives sacrificed in desperate attacks that bought mere seconds. Alara's crew faced near constant danger, but their resolve never wavered. The presence of Nox seemed to embolden them, a living reminder that courage could outweigh fear. The Threx responded with even greater fury. Their heavy cruisers unleashed massive energy beams, forcing the humans into evasive maneuvers that pushed ships to their limits. The Resolute shuddered under direct hits, hull plates glowing red from the heat. Alara's voice never faltered, directing attacks and defenses with a sharpness honed by years of combat. And through it all, Nox remained calm, its energy pulsing steadily, stabilizing shields, and even guiding the crew with subtle movements and purr-like vibrations. It was as if the creature understood not just the battle, but strategy itself. The human fleet, inspired by the tiny predator, began to turn the tide. Gaps appeared in the Threx lines as humans exploited weaknesses the aliens had not expected. Fighters slipped behind enemy cruisers, unleashing volleys that tore through engines and weapon systems. The combination of human ingenuity and Nox's mysterious energy shifted the balance. For a moment, hope flared across the human side. The impossible seemed possible. Even the Threx began to hesitate, realizing that their calculated fear had failed and their overwhelming numbers were not enough to crush the humans. Commander Alara watched Nox, now glowing brighter than ever, and understood the truth. Victory would not come from technology alone or from sheer force. It would come from determination, courage, and the bond between humans and the creature meant to scare them. The battle for Mars was far from over, but the tide had begun to turn. Humanity, against overwhelming odds, was showing that fear had no power over them, and as long as they stood together with allies like Nox by their side, they had a chance to survive, fight back, and perhaps even defeat an empire that believed they could be broken. The final stage of the battle loomed over Mars like a storm ready to break. The Threx flagship, Oblivion's Fang, descended from orbit, massive and terrifying, its black hull stretching over 3 kilometers. Energy weapons glimmered along its surface, ready to unleash destruction on everything beneath it. Commander Alara Voss stood on the bridge of the HMS Resolute, her hands gripping the console, her jaw tight with determination. The human fleet was battered but not broken, and Nox, now fully grown and immense, prowled quietly at her side, its glowing eyes watching the incoming threat with a calm intensity that made every human aboard feel steadier. The enemy had one goal: destroy the Resolute, crush the fleet, and make Mars a lifeless monument to Threx power. The humans, outnumbered and outgunned, prepared for a desperate strike. Every ship was assigned a target, every fighter a mission, every crew a role. The Martian defense grid fired relentlessly, beams slicing through the void toward the Fang, but the flagship's armor shrugged off most attacks. The moment of reckoning had arrived. Alara's voice cut through the tension, steady and commanding. "This is it. We strike together or we fall alone. Keep formation. Focus fire. Move fast. Strike hard." The Resolute led the charge. It dove through enemy lines like a spear, weaving between massive cruisers and dodging blasts that would have obliterated any ordinary vessel. Smaller human fighters followed, diving in and out, striking weak points, retreating, and striking again. The Threx were powerful, but humans were unpredictable. Every move was calculated yet creative, every maneuver a blend of instinct and ingenuity. Nox, sensing the danger, stepped closer to the ship's reactor, pressing its claws against the energy conduit. A soft hum filled the Resolute, vibrating through the metal and into the crew's bones. The ship shuddered as its systems surged, shields strengthening beyond normal limits, engines blazing with renewed power. The humans realized the creature was giving them more than hope. It was giving them a fighting chance. Alara barked orders and the fleet fired with renewed intensity, synchronized with Nox's glowing energy. The Threx flagship faltered under the barrage. Its shields flickered as missiles and laser volleys tore through the hull. The massive ship shivered like a wounded beast, struggling to maintain formation. Alara made the decision. She piloted the Resolute straight toward the Fang, weaving through the remaining cruisers with unparalleled precision. Every fiber of her being focused on the target. Every human fighter behind her followed, driven by courage, desperation, and the belief that they could win. As the Resolute closed in, Alara contacted the Threx via comms, her voice calm and unyielding. "This is Humanity. You tried to scare us. You tried to crush us. You failed, and we will not surrender." The Fang responded with a volley of energy, tearing into the Resolute's shields. Sparks flew across the bridge, alarms blared, and the crew braced for impact. Nox stepped between Alara and the console, glowing brighter than ever. Its claws touched the hull, and energy surged outward, stabilizing the ship for the final run. With one decisive strike, the Resolute's railgun fired directly into the Threx flagship's main reactor. A massive explosion shook the void. Fire and debris erupted from the Fang, scattering across orbit, tearing apart smaller cruisers in the blast. The humans watched, holding their breath. The flagship was shattered, its weapons offline, its fleet thrown into chaos. But the Resolute was not unscathed. The blast ripped through its hull, tearing metal, knocking out systems, and throwing crew members off their feet. Smoke filled the bridge, alarms screamed, and for a moment, hope wavered. And then, through the chaos, the humans saw Nox, standing strong, glowing softly, guarding Commander Alara, who had survived despite the destruction around her. The Threx had expected humans to break, to flee, to surrender. Instead, they had faced impossible odds, fought with courage, and used the unexpected ally they had been given, a creature bred for fear, as a source of strength. The first wave of the battle was won, the flagship destroyed, and the remaining Threx forces retreated into the void. The cost had been high, but humanity had proven once again that their courage, adaptability, and unity could overcome even the deadliest enemies. Nox had not only survived, but it had become a symbol, a beacon of hope that reminded every human that strength could come from the most unexpected places, and that bravery, even against overwhelming odds, could shape the fate of worlds. The wreckage of the HMS Resolute drifted silently in the shadow of Mars, broken metal floating against the endless black of space. Smoke curled from torn panels, and sparks flickered from damaged conduits. The battle had ended, but the cost was clear. Many ships had been lost, countless lives had been sacrificed, yet the humans who survived now floated among the remnants of their victory, weary but unbroken. Commander Alara Voss lay against a scorched bulkhead, her uniform torn, her breath ragged. Blood streaked her cheek, and her body ached from the strain of the fight. Yet even in the haze of exhaustion and pain, her gaze found Nox. The Varric cub, now fully grown and majestic, moved carefully among the debris, its glowing eyes sweeping over the bridge. Where metal had twisted and torn, Nox's presence seemed to bring calm. It nudged the commander gently with its head, letting her feel the warmth and life that had become their shared strength. In that moment, Alara understood the full truth. The battle had been more than a clash of fleets, more than a test of weapons and strategy. It had been a test of spirit, of will, and of the bond that could exist between two completely different beings. The humans had survived because they had refused to give in to fear. Nox had survived because it had chosen trust over instinct. Together they had created something stronger than any weapon the Threx could design. Messages of victory and hope began to spread from Mars to the rest of the human colonies. Satellites, still operational, relayed footage of the battle. Images of the massive Varric cub standing alongside battered but determined human ships. Images of civilians cheering from shelters, and the sight of a commander who had faced almost certain death and yet remained standing. Across the Sol system, people celebrated not just a military victory, but the resilience of their species. The Threx Dominion, shocked and demoralized by the failure of their flagship and the courage of the humans, began to retreat. Reports of surrenders came in from distant star systems, as alien soldiers who had followed centuries of calculated orders witnessed the unexpected determination of humanity. Their enemy's weapon, created to inspire terror, had become a symbol of hope and unity. Back on Mars, Ilara and her crew began the painstaking process of rescue and recovery. Human engineers worked alongside civilians to salvage what they could from the debris, repairing ships and tending to the injured. Nox moved among them, gentle and watchful, a living reminder of the courage and loyalty that had carried them through the battle. Slowly, a sense of normalcy returned. Streets once scorched by orbital bombardment were cleared, shelters opened, and life began again. The people of Mars had survived not because of technology alone, not because of superior firepower, but because they had fought with intelligence, courage, and heart. Ilara looked out over the rebuilt city, Nox resting at her side. She saw the children playing among the ruins, laughing without fear. She saw soldiers helping civilians, and civilians helping soldiers, each one contributing to the rebirth of their home. And she understood that the battle would be remembered not for the destruction, but for the bond, the bravery, and the choice to stand united in the face of overwhelming odds. Years later, statues of Commander Ilara and Nox stood in the Martian capital, a tribute to the courage and spirit that had saved the colony. People from all corners of human space came to see them, to remember that victory often comes from more than strength or strategy. It comes from hope, trust, and the willingness to face fear with courage. The plaque beneath the statues read, "They unleashed a predator to scare us." But it chose to nap in our arms instead, and that is why humanity will never kneel. Nox, once a creature bred for terror, had become a living legend, a symbol of the bond between humans and the unknown, and a reminder that even the smallest spark of trust could ignite the fiercest fire of resistance. Commander Ilara, now older, would often sit beside the cub, watching the sun rise over the red Martian plains. She would remember the battle, the loss, and the incredible courage of her people. But most of all, she would remember Nox, the predator that had chosen them, and in doing so had changed the fate of humanity forever. In that quiet moment, on a planet that had been tested to its limits, humanity understood something simple and powerful. No matter how terrifying the universe might be, they would face it together and they would endure.